Welcome to the Bee Student Podcast, and thank you for joining me. Today, our guest is Paul Twyford of the Winter Park Distilling Company. He's going to be talking about bourbon and entrepreneurship, the keys and tips and tricks to make you more entrepreneurial and successful. Let's get started. Paul, great to have you on the show. Paul Twyford is, in full disclosure, a friend and one of the key entrepreneurial influences in the Central Florida region, but I also think you're influential across the country. We'll get into that in a minute with what you do. You have been described to me as a bon vivant. I'm glad I got you laughing right out of the gate. But, I mean, just look at you. We've got cool shoelaces, cute socks. We've got a pocket square, contrast stitching on the buttonholes. He knows how to live a good life. And I think one of the things that you deliver to people as an entrepreneur is how to experience life in a much more exciting, dignified way as a distiller of spirits. So look, we're going to talk today a little bit about the B side to your record, which is making whiskey, but actually you're an entrepreneur. So tell us a little bit about you, your journey, how you got started in entrepreneurship, because it was what I know from you is you did less glamorous things as an entrepreneur to become the kind of entrepreneur that you are today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. That was quite a flattering introduction. Thank you for that.
Have you been called a bon vivant to your face?
I have.
Okay, there you go. Guilty as charged.
But no, it's an honor to be on your podcast. This the work you've done in the short amount of time you've been doing this podcast is amazing. I've learned a ton from your guests and you, and I'm flattered to be here. So
well, I know people are going to learn from you today and get inspired. I'm excited.
Me too. So, my journey as an entrepreneur, kind of stems from the fact that I sort of have a problem with authority, and it's very hard for me to be the square peg in the round hole in corporate America, and so I started my first company when I was 28. It was decidedly less glamorous than distilling or anything that I do today. It was dry cleaning. And I didn't know anything about dry cleaning. I knew that I wanted to start a business. I knew I didn't have any money and nobody was going to back me and bankroll that. So I was trying to figure out how I could start a company that I didn't need any money for and that I could potentially make into something substantial. And
no experience ironing, washing clothes,
zero.
Anything like
Nothing.
that. But let's go for it into dry cleaning.
Well, so what I knew is that people liked convenience. And at the time, there were only like 2 dry cleaners in all of Central Florida that offered pickup and delivery service. And so essentially, I started a pickup and delivery service.
So let's pause for a minute. You started with the problem first.
Yeah.
So I think when people are thinking about entrepreneurship or what I should be going into or how I can meet my customer needs better, think about the problem first.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So the problem is I don't have enough time. There isn't enough. There is a gap in the market, not in dry cleaners, because how many dry cleaners were in that space when you entered it?
100.
Hundreds.
At least. Yeah.
Okay. And what we didn't have, though, the gap in the marketplace was on convenience. Keep
Yeah.
going. This is very interesting.
Yeah. So I went out and bought a couple hundred laundry bags and some.
As you do.
Yeah. And some little flyers. And on credit, I went out and bought a delivery van and decaled that thing up. And I was off to the races. And I literally went door to door, ding dong. Hi, I'm Paul from Rio LA Dry Cleaning, and we pick up and deliver right at your house, yada, yada, yada. You can, to this day, wake me up at 4 a.m. and say, what's your spiel for the door to door dry cleaning thing? And I can rattle it
Wind
off for
you
you.
up
Yeah.
and go. I love it.
And I knocked on it, most 9 out of 10 doors slammed in my face. And, maybe 1 out of 10 said, yeah, sure, give me the bag. I'll put something out on Monday. So, that eventually grew into a substantial business where we had a plant, a couple of stores, 3 trucks on the road 6 days a week. So, yeah, it was, that was my foray into having a business.
So we focus a lot on entrepreneurship on this podcast. And I think people have a romanticized notion about entrepreneurship sometimes because they might be like you. People have problems with authority and think, I'm going to be my own boss. I'm not going to be a peg that fits in this hole in a corporation, like you said. And I'm going to be my own boss and it's going to be glamorous. And then they get to the part about 9 doors out of 10 slamming in their face. What enabled you to keep going when you had 9 out of 10 doors slamming in your face?
I mean, I think a lot of things factor into that. Number one, just grit and determination. And I'm not going to fail.
I'm not going to be a cog in a corporate wheel. Okay.
And I think that's fundamentally right. I mean, and there's lots of good quotes out there. Steve Jobs had one about, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, eventually you're going to get hit in the face with a brick and you're going to have to decide how you respond to that. And most people are not going to respond well. Right.
Yeah.
And so that speaks to exactly what you're talking about. Right. And so I think that you have to decide whether or not you have the gumption to do this. And I think that is not a decision you make once, right? That is a decision you make every day when you wake up.
9 times a day out of the 10, right?
Yeah.
Did you know there was going to be that much rejection? Did you anticipate it?
I mean, I don't, yes. I think intellectually you draw out your business plan, you go, okay, I can have this kind of conversion rate and all this, but I think there's an emotional component to that, right? Like these people just rejected me, right? That's what it feels like.
The beat down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And again, you just have to have the fortitude to push through that and go, okay, well, that's not my client, but the next door might be.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you come across now, what is it, 30 years later, as someone who lets everything roll off his back, right? Do you think you built that muscle or do you think you've always had that muscle?
I think it's a combination. I think number one, I present that better than what's inside, right? I'm kind of like the little duck paddling across the pond and underneath the water, just going as hard as he can. And
I like that little duck impression there. That was good.
and above water just looks calm and cool. And so I think that is something I have developed over time because you just don't want to look like you're constantly frantic. And
so if you're going to be an entrepreneur, top tip, be a duck. Okay, I love it. So what happens? You sell the dry cleaning business?
Yeah.
Okay, what happens next?
So went into a couple of other businesses, commercial weatherproofing, not very glamorous either.
Did you know about that either?
No, didn't even know that was a business.
Okay, so here's the other tip is you don't have to be an expert to start. Right?
Oh, to the contrary. Like I went into a subsequent business later on, and I was trying to recruit someone else to be a partner in that business, and he ultimately decided that that's not what he wanted to do.
He didn't dream of being a commercial weatherproofer.
Well, no, this was a different business, but he ended up working for me. It worked out great for me. He just got a paycheck, but he just didn't have to his credit, he understood that he didn't have the makeup to be an entrepreneur, but he was kind of hung up on the idea that, well, I don't know all that I feel like I need to know to venture into this. And I said, most of my career, I haven't had any clue what I was doing, right? But I didn't let that stand in the way of me doing it, right? Like sometimes you just have to have faith, right? So one of my favorite definitions of what an entrepreneur is someone who willingly jumps off a cliff with the firm belief that he will build a airplane before he hits the ground. And,
love it.
And that's the kind of personal belief that you have to have if you're going to do, I think, anything substantial in life.
So when you talked about he knew he didn't have what it took to be an entrepreneur, we've talked already about resiliency and expecting a certain level of rejection and having a very unglamorous on-ramp, right? Like I've done 3 entrepreneurial ventures, and there's a beat down for sure. It's a common denominator in every one of those. And you've got to trust a 24-year-old named Caitlin to let you have a, with all just no disrespect, but I'm begging this 24-year-old to let me have a trunk show at a hotel somewhere, and my whole business is hanging on 24-year-old Caitlin saying yes or no, right?
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
what has happened to me, right? But that was the thing that we needed to do to move from the next square to the next square. So having that high tolerance for rejection, having that resilience and grit, and then also being able to hold space for imperfect action to start and go off the cliff and build your airplane on the way down, right? What else do you think separates someone from being entrepreneurial and not?
Well, I think one of the key measures of success for an entrepreneur is their ability to deal with people. I don't think that that's particularly unique to entrepreneurs. I think that's probably true in corporate, although I wouldn't know because that's a world I don't go to. But it's certainly true in life, right? I think that growing up, our society sort of feeds us this narrative that it's the stuff in life that matters, what kind of car you drive and where you live and stuff like that. And I think that over time you realize, at least smart people realize, that that's not what really matters in life. What matters is the people in your life, right? And so, and those relationships, right? And that's so much more important than the stuff in your life. And it's so much more important in business, right? That my team, will run through walls for me, and that's no accident because they know I will do that for them, right? So,
well, I've watched you implement a really effective people strategy in the way that you have built your own business that you're in now. I think you've got 5 entities or whatever. We're going to get to more of that in a minute. But I've watched this and I've studied this. So we run a chamber of commerce in Winter Park, and we get told all the time, we've made a corporate decision to no longer have chamber memberships. And I'm like, that in the 60s is something that would be a knife at the heart of your company.
yeah.
It would be like, you don't show up in the community. You don't look like you're invested in the community. You're not paying what my mother used to refer to as civic rent. You're benefiting from that community, but not paying into it. Nobody would be caught dead without a chamber membership, 60s, 70s, 80s. And now people are making these decisions that, we don't need to be doing that anymore. And that's troubling. Of course, I run a chamber of commerce, so that's troubling. But it's also troubling when I think about what does that do to community at a time when we need community the most. We're hearing about these skyrocketing incidents of people feeling lonely. We know the effects of loneliness on physical health and mental health. We know that people are feeling fragmented and disconnected. There's deeper and deeper divisions being cut into us politically and as a culture. We need community now more than ever, and yet people are so focused on taking every dollar they invest and showing the exact direct link to the ROI on that $1 invested, and that spreadsheet formula is the only way we're going to continue investing in community. And so we see people pulling back from that. There will be consequences for doing that. And I think there already are for some, because you never know how much you need your community unless you need your community. And part of having a chamber strategy is paying into a PR system that's there for you when the chips are down, right? It's like a AAA kind of for business. But I've watched you pour into your community and expect nothing in return.
Well, I mean, I think I think all of us should have that expectation,
But
right?
talk about that for a minute, because I've watched you just show up and do stuff that doesn't even look like it's related to the business of distilling whiskey. And yet you are absolutely harvesting from those relationships all the time. You've played the long game with your strategy on relationships. You have focused on people, both internally and externally, and it's paid off for you. You run one of the most successful entrepreneurial enterprises in our region. You have an extremely well-respected brand with how many award-winning labels? I mean, national award winners,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
You're being very humble right now. I'll handle the promotion. But talk about that decision to do it that way when we've got everybody crunching numbers down to if I put $1 in, I need a $9 ROI or we're not touching it, right? And I need to be able to track it and send it up my uplink to my marketing manager. There's a soullessness to that. There's an AI driven, we have to make everything more technocratic and there really isn't how do I give? It's more how do I get? You've done this give first strategy. Talk about your decision to do that.
Yeah, let me first talk about the Winter Park Chamber of Commerce, because you mentioned how there are companies out there that have unilaterally pulled back and said, well, we're just not going to be in chambers anymore, any chambers. And I would argue that not all chambers are created equal and certainly not run the same, right? And I understand a company saying, you know what, that old school way of running a chamber where we do a business after hours, good old boy drinking club, kind of thing.
Thing I hate the most about chambers.
Exactly.
Yes.
I think that pulling back from that kind of environment, it might be appropriate in today's day and age, right? And I would argue that there are still chambers that run their chamber that way, right? Maybe most chambers. I don't know. I'm not in that many, but I know that the Winter Park Chamber is not run that way at all.
Are you receiving a fee to say this right now?
I'm not, but I want to recognize the work that you've done to make sure that the Winter Park Chamber is not run that way and offers incredible value to its members. So having said that, I'll answer your question.
Let's go back to you.
Yeah. Is that I think that particularly early in your career, you are rewarded by saying yes, by opting in on darn near everything, right? Like if you're asked, hey, would you serve here? Would you do this? I think the default answer should be yes. And then you can sort out the details later, right? And if that ultimately turns out to be kind of a waste of your time, then you can always change gears and say yes to something else and move on from that. But
even if it doesn't feel completely adjacent to what you do,
of
you
course,
should say yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Give me an example after you've had your water.
Well, I mean, I was asked I guess it's almost 10 years ago now, to join the board of the Winter Park History Museum, the Winter Park Historical Association that runs the History Museum.
What's the relationship to whiskey there?
Yeah, not much, right? But, I grew up around here and I have strong ties to this community, and I have an appreciation for history and for specifically the history of Winter Park. And I thought, well, from a business standpoint, I don't know that I can make a strong case for that being a good use of my time. But on a personal level, it's something I'm interested in. And, it's a good way, like you were talking about earlier, for me to give back to my community, right? And so I did that. Ultimately, they saw fit to make me the president of that organization. And that was a very positive experience. I've since rolled off that board as the bylaws said I had to.
Oh, because you'd probably still be there if they didn't.
And I've since, joined other boards, right? So I think that's an example of one where I didn't go into that hoping to get anything out of it from a business perspective. And I've never actually calculated out, whether or not I did, right? That's not why I did it, right? So, I think it's opting in, pouring yourself into your community, and just trusting that the relationships that you build, are going to be good ones, whether they're good ones for your business or just good ones where you make friends and, have good relationships that enrich your life?
I love that you said this because weirdly, a lot of the people who follow this podcast are about half my age. Thank you. But we want really the wealth of my experience and the people who are probably close to my age, their experience to trickle down to younger people. We want this podcast to be kind of a cheat code for young people to figure out how to get from where I am to where I want to be. I think you just gave one of the best cheat codes you could possibly give young people, which is say yes.
Yeah.
And don't expect anything in return. We're in such a technology focused time where we've got to say, oh, I'm not touching that unless I got 4x ROI on it. I'm not going to go anywhere near it. Well, maybe it's your mental health that's going to benefit. Maybe you're going to feel less lonely. Maybe you're going to feel connected to new friends, or you might meet your spouse in that thing, right? And so, maybe those are going to be the dividends that accrue. But I've watched you leverage these relationships from these various community organizations in ways you can't imagine, because the line is so far along blurred for you that you can't even sift out what was this or what was that. I've just watched you succeed. So let's talk about commercial weatherproofing was number 2, dry cleaner number 1. What came next after that?
Then we started the Winter Park Distilling Company. So
so your title at the Winter Park Distilling Company is?
Co-founder.
Let's talk about how you now say for the third time, and I love this because I've never done any of the things that I've never led a chamber of commerce before. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anything about children's swimwear or consulting in London or biotechnology, and yet I've done all those things. That's another thing for young people to think. Don't get too precious about what you already know how to do or don't know how to do. If you've got those ingredients of risk tolerance, you've got some resiliency, and you can take some hits, and you're okay with imperfect action, go ahead and get something started, right?
Yeah.
So, but let's talk about, here you are in Winter Park Distilling Company. This is cool. You wake up one day and you say, I never made whiskey before, but let's giddy up. I want to hear about this.
So I had sold my other companies at that point and trying to, at that point, I'm in my 30s trying to figure out what am I going to do when I grow up. And so I kind of...
We know it's not work for a corporation.
Exactly.
Because of your problem with authority, but you're now ruled by the, what is it, alcohol and tobacco, whatever?
yeah, well...
Your problem with authorities come home to roost, hasn't it?
Exactly, yeah. The irony of all that, right? And of course, now I have a lot of customers, right, in all of the things that I do. And in some ways, each and every one of them are my boss, right? So I now have, hundreds, maybe thousands of bosses, right? So it's, you can't escape that, I can't think. But anyway... Yeah, so I had this crazy idea that maybe we could start a craft distillery here in Florida. And I went to my friend Andrew Asher, who's a very talented attorney, and asked him, hey, here's kind of a back of envelope idea of maybe what we could do here. Pretty sure there's like rules involved, and that's
maybe having a lawyer on the founder team is a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. So he did some research, and about a week later came back and sort of half jokingly said, hey, I think we could pull this off, but I'm pretty sure that it'd be less red tape if we went in the uranium enrichment business. So and he was, like I said, half joking, and he was not far off, right? So only because of his legal acumen did it only take us 2 years from the time we had that conversation to the time we had a piece of paper saying that we could make alcohol. So it was the barriers to entry are high. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So and maybe a little harder back then. So that was in 2010. So the Winter Park Distilling
Company. And to think people were bootlegging alcohol with no problem 100
exactly.
years ago.
Right. There's people with no teeth up in the mountains who are making this stuff. I mean, how hard can it be, right? That's what I figured.
Apparently hard.
Yeah.
Okay, so you get your piece of paper.
Yeah. And so then we started making clear spirits because, that's what you can bring to market first. So
Why
vodka.
is that?
Well, because I can make vodka in 2 weeks, right?
Okay.
We make our vodka out of corn.
Okay.
And
most vodka is made from potato starch, right?
So potato is kind of the historical thing. That's what most people think vodka is made of. You can actually make vodka out of almost anything that's got...
I remember going to a wedding and there was a commentary on the quality of the alcohol being served. And my uncle said, I think they're peeling the potatoes for that vodka in the back. That was a memorable slogan. Okay.
That's funny. My bet is that vodka didn't get made out of potatoes at all, because nowadays most of the vodkas that are made from potatoes, Chopin is one of them, are very, very expensive.
Okay.
Again, you can make it out of anything. Ciroc vodka is made from grapes.
Okay.
So we can take it from corn to vodka in your glass in about 2 weeks.
Wow.
And
good to know in case there's a vodka rationing problem.
Exactly. Break glass in case of emergency.
Okay.
So the thing with brown spirits is that you got to basically go through that same process, and then you got to put it in a barrel and wait. Right? And it's years in a barrel. So it took us a while to get brown spirits to market, right? So we came out with our first bourbon in 2013. It was the first bourbon ever brought to market in the state of Florida.
Was that Bonfire?
No, Bonfire was our second. So our Bear Gully Reserve was our first, clocking in at 107 proof. And that started winning awards the very next year. And it has since won awards all over the world.
Is that your best performer award-wise?
Yes, but Bonfire's right on its heels.
Okay, so let's start and talk about a couple of choices, right? I hated bourbon before we became friends. And I'm a
bad influence.
No. It's actually enhanced the quality of my life. I'll talk about that in a minute. But I went to University of Florida, and my dorm was across from the stadium. And if you've been to a UF football game, anytime before November, you know that you are never going to be hotter than any other place in the entire world in that stadium. It's really, really hot.
Yes.
And as college students are wont to do, hard liquor is not served in the stadium, but very expensive beers are. So there's a proclivity to hide liquor somewhere on your person to get it into the stadium and mix it with Coke and drink a liquor drink all throughout the game. Well, you have to have clear stadium bags now, and there's pat downs when you walk in. So when I went to UF, men would fill a bladder of a Ziploc bag full of cheap bourbon and put it in their shorts with duct tape. So I would go run stadiums at UF the day after the game, and it was nothing but spent bladders of Jim Beam with duct tape and Ziploc bags littering the whole thing. And it was the disgusting smell, and I really hated the smell of it. I probably drank it once and thought, my whole mouth is burning. This is like the worst kind of cough syrup you could ever put in your mouth. I hate this stuff. Count me out on bourbon. And then I met you. Okay. So after meeting you, I went and did the bourbon trail, and I learned how to drink bourbon. Kentucky Chew, you got to swill it around your mouth first, get your mouth ready for it, and then you can really start to enjoy the layered experience of consuming bourbon. It's now a spirit I really enjoy consuming, and there's a culture around it that I really like. And actually, I'm going to give away one of my little secrets now. I teach other women to do this. The world of business was created by men. And a foolish woman with a blind spot will ignore that at her own peril. And when I want to have a meeting with a man where I want to remove the barriers that I am a woman and he's a man, and we're scheduling how we're going to meet up, I'll say, you want to meet for drinks. Well, now that my kids are grown up and out of the house, I used to want to get right home and manage their sports and homework and all that stuff. My kids are grown and out of the house. Someone says, you want to meet for a drink? Meet for work. I say, yeah, let's meet for a drink. And if I want to really be precious about removing that barrier between the fact I'm a woman and he's a man, I'll order a bourbon. And it's amazing what happens when I do that. It's all gone. I'm suddenly treated like an equal. And so I do that specifically and intentionally so that we can level this playing field and be collaborators and partners in that meeting. So I've learned to drink bourbon. I've learned to love bourbon. I've learned to appreciate it. It's not like I'm having a shot of it every now and then. I have it on special occasions or when I'm intentional about it, but I've been exposed to probably 30 bourbons because of you. Your bourbons are on my shelf, of course. I love them. But I got to go to Kentucky and learn all the steps that go into bourbon distilling and the choices that distillers have to make about what type of cask, what kind of wood, what was aged in it prior to bourbon going in it, what proof are we going to decide to finish this off at, all those things. I'm probably not even using the right words, but tell me about some of the choices that you're making when you're saying, we're going to make this, it's going to be award winning.
Well, I mean, to a large extent, that's trial and error, right? I mean, you know, kind of like we talked about earlier, like a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. And so, you know, you kind of go in and you say, well, we're just going to figure this out, right? And we were, I think, more lucky than good in the beginning. Like our first batch, I was like, wow, this is actually, I mean,
Okay, but that's kind of your whole life. Is you're like, oh gosh, I just got lucky on that. I'm like, really? Because you make your own luck. How did you guys decide to make these choices?
Well, I mean, obviously we did our homework, right? We researched what makes a good bourbon.
And did you say, here's the gap that exists in the portfolio of existing bourbons?
Well, I mean, at the time in particular, you know, we're, you know, going back to, you know, 2010, 2011.
Yeah, bourbon's come into its own in the past.
Right. And there's a ton of great craft spirits producers out there now. There weren't very many. We were kind of in the Wild West back then, right?
But still regulated. Boy, were we regulated.
Yes.
Okay.
And still are. Mm-hmm. But if you're watching TTB, we're paying attention. But you know, there was a need in the market that maybe the market didn't know that there was a need, right? But there was a gap in the market for handmade craft spirits, right? Something that you're not going to get from the big guys.
No stainless steel vats full of whatnot.
Right.
Up in the industrialized bourbon complex of Kentucky.
Right. I'm not going to go into all of I can, but I won't here go into all of the geeky stuff about what separates the way they do it on a big scale, because they can't do it on the small scale that we do, right? Versus what we do, right? And so we have both an advantage and a disadvantage. Our disadvantage is that we don't have the economies of scale, right? And so people go, why
or the marketing dollars, or the channels, the distributor relationships, all that.
Right? The flip side of that is that we can take the time and attention to just make a better product.
Okay.
And there are people who think that what's the juice in the bottle is the most important thing. Now, you know, the marketing complex that the big guys have will tell you otherwise, and some people buy into that, and that's okay. But there are enough people who value the quality of the product itself that has, you know, made us a successful company.
So this is a dumb question, but what else do we think about besides the juice in the barrel? Because we're making a beverage. Shouldn't we be focused on the juice in the barrel?
Well, I think that for years, you know, generations, the kind of marketing complex around the quote big guys have convinced us as consumers that, you know, maybe this product is aspirational, right? If you drink this, you're one of the cool kids, or, you know, whatever, right?
Oh, it was absolute vodka for me in the 80s. Come on, I thought I was going to be cool if I drank that.
So here's an interesting story. I'll try to distill this down to a short one. Is that in the 80s, Absolute was the most expensive vodka on the shelf. It was like $18, and that you couldn't buy a vodka in the United States more.
Now that would be the cheapest.
Yeah, and The same guy who convinced lots of college kids that Jägermeister is a good thing to drink, he had already made his fortune through Jägermeister, and he decided, hey, I'm going to create a vodka. Now, he was like, I don't know, in his 60s, maybe 70s at the time.
Okay.
And he's like, this is going to be my final chapter. And he said, okay, how am I going to position this so that this is the most exclusive vodka anybody's ever heard of, right? I'm going to make it in France because that's
Right.
and it's going to have this unbelievable bottle that doesn't look like anything else on the market.
I remember getting it from the liquor store and being like, ooh, look at it. It's so cool.
Well, so he creates Grey Goose and prices it at like $27, $28.
Okay.
So 50% higher than the most expensive vodka on the market, right? And he took out full page ads in the Wall Street Journal saying, introducing the world's greatest vodka, right? And I mean, this guy was very market focused, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he convinced a lot of people that Grey Goose was the best vodka in the history of the world, right? And he made a lot of money, sold that company, and did very well with that, right? But that's an example of how that kind of marketing complex can take, what is a decent vodka, but certainly not anything better than a
We're
lot
not
of
talking
other
about
vodkas.
Jesus' tears,
Yeah,
are we?
exactly.
Right?
These are
Okay.
not the tears of unicorns, right? But he took a solid product and dressed it up in a way that made him a lot of money. So that's the kind of thing that we as little craft spirits guys are competing against.
So I think vodka, maybe I'm wrong. I think vodka was the sexy spirit coming out of the late 80s, moving into the 90s. I think it's bourbon now. Maybe it's gin. I don't know. What do you think?
So it's been bourbon for the last maybe 10 years.
Okay.
Bourbon's still kind of king,
Mm-hmm.
but you're right. I think gin is on the way up. Tequila is certainly on the way up.
Yep.
There's it's always a changing marketplace, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who knows, there might be some spirit that we don't even know about yet, or it might be some, the next cool thing 5 years from now might be something that we've all kind of forgotten about.
Now, how do you guys balance all of those influences with, we're really good at being craft distillers and we're really good at winning awards all over the country in craft distilling circles and let's be honest, to win an award in those circles is really a big deal because these are serious bourbon nerds, right?
Yeah.
That are deciding what is the elevated, like, sixth circle of heaven of bourbon, right? And so to do that means your product's just got to be really great. Right. But like, I've always admired the label the art on your label. I've always admired the shape of the bottle, the choices you guys have made in every one of those product choices. Just for our listeners, what kind of barrel do you age those bourbons in?
So it has to be new white American oak.
Right.
So
to be called bourbon,
yes,
has to be
correct. Yes.
But has it been a cognac barrel? Do you do any of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, we do, but not for bourbon because like you just said, that by law bourbon has to be in a virgin white American oak barrel with a char, and there's different
Do you get precious
levels
about your chars?
Yeah, yes. So the different char levels, and then do you want it toasted and charred?
Do you do toasted and charred?
For certain products we do, and for others we don't. So it's there are a ton of variables. There's so many more variables in bourbon than there are in, say, vodka.
Right.
And that's
I think
why,
there's more variables in bourbon than there are in wine. I mean, it's
I mean, it's
amazing.
right up there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And
amazing.
yeah. And so everything from the mash bill, which is our lingo for ingredients.
What kind of corn do you guys use?
We use Florida corn.
I love it.
Yeah.
Florida
so
corn.
we try to source as many things locally as
Okay.
possible.
How many other entrants in the market use Florida corn? Are you maybe the only one that you know of?
We were the only one when we started doing
Okay.
it. There
And
may
Florida
be
corn, by the way, is delicious. People
Yeah.
think of like Indiana corn. That's feed corn.
Yeah.
Florida corn's eaten corn. It's
Yes,
delicious and
yes.
sweet.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah. We don't have a ton of great agriculture products come out of Florida, but corn is one of them. And so, like, for instance, we have to get our malted barley from up north.
Okay.
I just don't know of a place around here that grows or malts barley,
Mhm.
but corn, we can get that here. So, and so there's that's one of those sort of strategic advantages that we have, that A, we start with really good ingredients, B, we try to locally source as much as we can. And like we make rum, for instance, and as you know, we grow a whole bunch of sugar cane here in Florida, and so we have all the sugar cane we need to make a bunch of rum. So so there, like I said, there are some advantages to that.
So I've loved this conversation because we've talked a lot about geeky stuff about bourbon, but we've also talked about entrepreneurship. In the lightning round, what's one brand besides yours that you think just gets it right, whether it's bourbon or any other kind of spirit?
You put me on the spot here.
Yeah, it's the hot seat. Come on.
I'll give you one. Garrison Brothers out of Texas,
which you've brought to me and
I
sits
have,
on my bar.
Yeah, so Dan Garrison is a colleague, and I think just does great work. And I hate to single him out just because there are so many other contemporaries out there that are doing incredible stuff. But I would argue that he and his team, I mean, he's got quite the operation out in Hye, Texas, HYE, outside of Austin, and they just do great work, and they've been doing it longer than we have. And so I think that all of their bourbons are just exceptional. So
okay, Garrison Brothers, but we really want you to get Bear Gully or Bonfire Bourbon from the Winter Park Distilling Company. So if people want to get it, they go on your website.
They can do that. I think I can make an announcement now that by the time this airs, we will have a new location on Park Avenue.
In Winter Park.
Yeah, in Winter Park, yes. And
come visit.
Yeah, so you can come by and buy it by the bottle or by the glass and come enjoy a cocktail.
I love it. So on this podcast, we focus on the B side to people's records. So, it might be I'm a chamber CEO, but I really want to focus on the fact that I love dogs, right? I can't decide if the B side to your record is bourbon distiller or entrepreneur. What do you think?
Oh, I don't know. I would say the B side to my record is my relationships with people. I mean, I think that's the if you're to put a gun to my head and said what's the most important thing in your life, it's the people in my life. And so I think that's probably the true B-side.
Well, Paul, I really appreciate you sharing your story, your top tips about saying yes, being resilient, getting ready for a bunch of rejection, and then also imperfect action to get started. Those are some key takeaways for our viewers today. We're so excited you shared your story with us. Paul Twyford of the Winter Park Distilling Company, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.